Enni Bertling has seen it all when it comes to climbing in Finland. When she started, she was one of the few climbers in the country. Then she helped form the Finnish Ice Climbing Team, and is now the head of the youth national team, among other roles too numerous to list, but which also includes route setting, coaching, and occasionally still competing when the mood strikes. Still, despite how it sounds, her path to a professional climbing career was anything but straightforward. In this episode, we chat about transitioning away from a scientific research career, winning the first ever World Cup medal for Finland, how she thinks about coaching and mentoring youth, what the climbing in Finland is like, and what do you do with only 1 hour of daylight in winter. Before we get to the interview, I'd like to give a shout out to our new members, David, Martin, Brace, Layla, Ryan, Glenn, Amy, Sonia, Anders, Caleb, Caroline, and Selena. Thanks to you and everyone who supports the podcast and online magazine, and if you don't, consider becoming a member, even a free one, at iceicebeta.com. All right, we will get to the interview with Enni shortly, but a quick message from our sponsors first. We get it. For us, ice season never really ends. It just kind of blends between rock, plastic, and plywood until waterfalls freeze over again. No matter how you climb in the off-season, Finnish Industries keeps you going till your next bout of screaming barface. With their gym-safe dry ice evolutions, you can keep up your fitness indoors. And if you're looking to challenge yourself on your home wall, they have the largest variety of dry tooling holds in America. Check out their full lineup of ice and dry tooling gear at furnace-industries.com. Because for us, it's always ice season.
Hi, it's Katie McKinstry Stylos. And when it comes to winter climbing, having the right gloves can make or break your day on the ice. With Enni, you're in good hands, a small boutique brand founded by passionate climbers for climbers. The mission is simple, to create the best ice climbing and dry tooling gloves that are durable, dexterous, and waterproof. Personally, I can't imagine climbing any day on tools without my new gloves. Whether I'm on a steep pitch and highlight climbing in my Vincent lights, belaying in the Bingo Cave with my Vincent mitts, or climbing at my limit in the Dolomites of Italy. They're my reliable partner in the cold and on tools. Experience the difference with Enni. Check them out at enni.com.
I always like hearing about different climbing areas, and I know of Finland because of Nali, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Hukkataival? Hukkataival. You know, he was big on the scene, obviously established Burden of Dreams, the world's first V17, and et cetera, et cetera. I used to be really into bouldering. And what is the climbing like in Finland?
I think in Finland, the climbing is doing really well. If we think about outdoor climbing, there is lots of bouldering, which is really hard. The typical Finnish bouldering is granite rocks, where it's tiny edges and it's just really hard. And then indoor climbing is doing well. We have amazing places in Helsinki. And
I will say that I'm continuously impressed by the gyms in Scandinavia, because I was looking at yours, and then like Magnus Midtbos is hard to ignore as well. What is it about Scandinavian gyms that they're just so nice?
I don't know. At least the company has done lots of work for that. And there is also, I think it's maybe the people, if people come to the gyms, then it's worth of building a bigger and better ones. And yeah, I think in Helsinki, people are totally spoiled. We have so much climbing per person in this area that it's amazing.
I guess like along those lines, though, what is the culture of climbing like in Finland? Because I imagine it's gotten a lot more popular. That sort of kind of aligns with the number of gyms that are available. But like historically, like when you got into climbing, what were you guys doing? Like what was the scene like then?
Oh, it was very different. Yeah, it was over 20 years ago. So there was not really gyms, or at least no commercial gyms. And you basically knew everybody who was in a climbing. And yeah, it was very different. I think the development within the last 15 years, the first commercial gyms came, and then it just exploded. So
do you have, well, I assume you have single pitch climbing as well, but do you have, this is my ignorance completely, like Norway, Sweden to some extent has mountains, but are there mountains and bigger stuff in Finland as well?
No, it's flat. Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's a place for climber to be. Yeah, it's quite flat. There is single beach climbs. Sport climbing, there is like a few cliffs which are like 60 meters high, but not like
Okay.
mountains. It's
Yeah.
Norway got at them all. We didn't. We got few hills, but they got all the real mountains. But at least everything we have is very hard.
Makes you strong. I guess along those lines, you were into ice climbing, and presumably that means, I mean, you're half the country or more is above the Arctic Circle, I think. And so, is there ice climbing in Finland?
Yes, yeah. We have a real winter, which is sometimes even a little bit too real when it gets so dark.
Hmm.
But yeah, there is a lot of like that's also mostly single pitch, but like really nice ice falls. Even near Helsinki in a good winter, you can climb a lot. And also in the northern parts, there is lots of ice climbing. I think the ice climbing is kind of like a good for Finnish people. I don't know if they like to ski in the darkness and climb in the darkness and wet and then ski again in the darkness. And it's very nice here.
Yeah. Well, I guess the seasonality of having 1 hour of light in the winter helps with that.
Yeah, at least you want to spend that 1 hour in outside.
I'm gonna stereotype a little bit. Is a day out ice climbing? Is it like you ski there, you do some climbing, then you take a break for ice fishing, then you do some more you do some more climbing, and then you like end in a sauna? Like what is that? What is a typical day out like?
Yeah, maybe know that some might do the ice fishing, but yeah, sauna is definitely the last thing. Yeah, I think it's very same as everywhere. The typical ice climbing day, there is lots of driving and walking, and like you have a snow until your hips, and it's very slow, and then you climb like 20 meters, which is pouring water. You freeze, and that's the best day ever.
Is so it's mostly, well, I guess it would have to be waterfall, but like sometimes in New Hampshire, because of how you're the scientist, so you would tell me, but basically it gets extruded because of the difference in pressure during the winter. So sometimes it'll leak through cracks, and that's how certain seams will form. But it's not specifically like waterfall ice. So I'm wondering if that's like the case as well.
You mean how the ice is, like where the water comes from?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually here because it's so flat, and then there is the one cliff, and also above it there is forest. So there is the water kind of in the soil, and then it just all the time strips, even if there is lots of snow. And actually, the years when there is lots of snow are much better because then there is water coming the whole winter.
I'm surprised it's warm enough to melt for the snow
Yeah,
to
but the
melt in there.
snow covers it, kind of keeps it like coming.
Huh.
But if it's there is no snow, then when it's minus degrees, it will freeze into the ground, and then there is maybe a winter when there is not so much ice on the ice falls.
Gotcha. Presumably it's like pine trees and fir and Douglas and things like that. Do you get a lot of that like fun yellow sappy ice from the forest then?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, it depends on the how the soil is, what color is the. There is one very famous, maybe the biggest ice fall in Finland. It's called the brown stream, which is coming the color from the ground. It's brown. But then there is also like a.
Brown stream's not a very appetizing line
No, but
to
yeah. And then there is like lots of blue, like very bright blue ice. So
adding it to the bucket list of places to visit, probably after Norway. No offense. Obviously, you were part of the dry tooling scene. You're actually part of the first ever dry tooling team from Finland, and really want to talk about that, and then your position and engagement with developing the youth teams in Finland. Along those lines, though, one thing that I've noticed, and I'm not sure it's totally accurate, I didn't do a ton of research, but my general perception is in Europe, you tend to have a lot more climbers with like advanced degrees, masters, PhDs, things like that. And in the US, there seems to be more like lifers that are just like willing to forego that. I'm just going to go climbing and that's going to be my thing. There's various reasons for that, I'm sure. One being the more accessible higher education, and typically it's free. But beyond that, I'm wondering if you've noticed that as well, and it must change like your relationship to climbing too, to some extent, right? Like you're not just a climber, but I'm wondering if you've ever come across that, or if you've ever even dabbled to think about
Yeah,
it.
I've noticed that too. That there is two types. Yeah, that's very hard. Like there is of course any
Yeah, of
kind of
course.
climbers, but there is those who just like very like dirtbag, just like climbing, 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 living in a car, and that's the only thing you need, only money to survive. That you can climb as much as possible. And then there is the others who climb like a lot and travel for climbing, and then you ask like what you do, and oh, they are awesome, doctors and something.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's maybe the way climbing is as a sport. It's requires same things as making a career in something. I don't know. At least for me, it's one thing I have never really enjoyed team sports or like some sports where you just like repeat same thing. So I need some intellectual thing in my sport. So I feel it's like it's the same people who then get really far in their career, or then people who just like decide that this is my life. I give everything to this.
There is a certain intellectual appeal of it with like rope systems and efficiency and
Route reading, like every time you go climb a new route, it's different. So you have to do also the brain work.
jumping the gun a bit. But when you were competing, was that something that you enjoyed about it?
Yeah. I think when I started competing, I didn't really see it coming because I had been climbing so many years and like really enjoyed the traveling and big routes and adventure side. And then I started competing and I noticed that I really liked that too. I feel that I have got all the sides of the sports.
We'll dive into that a little bit more, because you had actually a pretty rapid progression in comp ice climbing, and I'm curious to dive more into like your approach, because I imagine it was fairly analytical. You actually had a PhD, and you ended up working in cellular neuroscience. I'm curious, you were climbing and you were pursuing this advanced degree at the same time. What did interest you in that area that you were studying, and how did you balance that with climbing? Because you were going to pretty far flung places, as I understand.
In the first years, I think it was having the career, and because anyway, science, even if it's quite demanding, it's quite flexible. So it was easier to combine with the climbing trips and then working hard when you're home and then again going for a trip. But then after the kids, it's of course got kind of complicated, because then I had like three big things. I had the career, and then I had the family, then the climbing. So then it actually got quite complicated, and at some point it was too much, and then I had to pick something, and the career in science had to go.
Okay. What were you focused on? Because if you look at researchgate.com, there are a ton of articles, or research papers, excuse me, with your name on it.
Yeah. I was in science quite many years. So the last years, we were working in I did lots of live imaging, which I really loved in a science, like using the crazy expensive microscopes and see all the neurons growing and doing connections. So that was the best part of it, was the actual doing the preparations and grow the neurons and then look at them, and they were so beautiful. So yeah, I was studying the kind of memory formation, or actual how the neurons change their shape. So basically we were studying the proteins which are working when the neurons change their shape, how the proteins work there.
What did you find in your research?
A lot of things. Gets quite easily very specific, and then nobody understands anything.
Understood. Okay. From what I could gather, you ended up leaving academia, and I'm curious. I guess you said, once you had kids, it became more difficult. What was sort of the decision process to ultimately leave academia? Because I don't think that once you get to a postdoc level, it's common to leave or excuse me, I don't know if you were in academia, but it's not common to leave science at that point. So I'm curious, like, what your considerations were.
Actually, I think it's after doing the postdoc, there is the point where you have to decide which direction your career goes. If you want to apply funding and start your own group, like start study some subject, or then if you want to go work some other field or something. So there is like a checkpoint, like how committed you are to the science. And for me, the checkpoint came in a moment where I had just started competing. When I started competing, I got really into the coaching side, and I got really interested of that. I also started study coaching, and then I had the little kids, and then I decided that I have to pick what I want to do. It came quite naturally that then it was first I took 1 year off from the science to study the coaching, and then I was like, I'm not going back. Because then I also started working as a coach, so I also didn't need the work anymore, because you have to work at least some extent.
Well, some climbers do. If you're in America, you don't have to. You can just live off cat food. But apparently, in Europe, a lot more diligent.
Yeah, I think if you have kids, maybe then it's.
Yeah, that's fair. That is a meaningful distinction. Okay, so you started competing while you were doing research, I guess, postdoc, and then you had kids. And who were you coaching at that time?
Yeah, I started to coach at the gym, like adults, who is more like a personal training type of one-to-one coaching. And then I started to coach some of the youth teams at the same time. But that was in sport climbing. Then when I did my ice climbing career, at some point I also started the youth team for ice climbing too, because of course I wanted to spread the amazing sport also to the youths. So.
Did you do any coaching before when you were younger, maybe just like informally? I guess I'm wondering, did you have an inclination that coaching might be something of interest?
Not much, no. It was again something you find from yourself and realize that, oh, I actually enjoy this and I'm doing pretty well this, so hopefully doing well.
Okay, so I'm thinking about the progression of your career, and maybe we can talk about how you got into dry tooling, because I feel like maybe that'll help give a sense of how you got into coaching and things like that. So so what was your pathway into dry tooling?
Yeah, I think in my climbing career, after having the kids, because you cannot just pack everything and go for 2 months anymore, I think there was a shift in my climbing that I wanted to, when I went to the gym or trained, I wanted more out of it. So then it became more systematic. And then at the same time, when I was actually coached, and also I started to study it, I got more into okay, now I understand how you actually get better in this. And then the competing in ice climbing, there was a yearly competition which was only for fun in a dry tooling. That was a very fun competition. It was in the Olympic Stadium under the seats. So the wall was like a vertical, like concrete wall, and then this huge roof, which was like 25 meters of roof. Of course, we didn't climb all the way, but it was huge roof, and we had their yearly competition. And I noticed that actually that's very my style, because I'm quite strong, but I don't have so much finger power. So when I changed the tools, I actually could use all my skills, because I like to really analyze what I'm climbing, and I have good endurance. And then I actually could use all the strengths I have. So I started enjoying it. And I have this way, whatever I do, I just keep on doing it until I come to the end or got enough. And then I was like, we have to go to the international competitions. And I started to talk to the Mira and Tapio about it. And also actually Tapio had been thinking about it. And then it was like, all right, let's go. And we went to see the first World Cup, which didn't go that well, but I think I was sold. I really liked it. Then I started just training for that for a couple of years.
Based off of your strengths as a climber, you really got the short end of the stick growing up in Finland then, if endurance and being strong but not having strong fingers is what you're best at.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So you got into dry tooling and you found that it like really suited you style wise and like physically, well, physically and mentally capacity wise. This is making an assumption, but I imagine based off what you just said, you're a little bit of an analytical. And so when you start a new sport, when you started dry tooling, I guess specifically, like what were you looking at and evaluating that beyond just like, I really like this? Were you seeing that like, oh yeah, I really like this and I want to do a lot more of it? Like,
I don't know. I don't know. Somehow, I don't know if I was very analytical at that point, but I think the first time we went to the World Cup and saw the whole thing, I felt like, okay, I want to be part of this. I want to train hard and see where I can get in the sport. It felt like this is my next dream, is this one, because I have so many things for this, and it's just something totally new. I had been climbing ice for like 10 years already
oh
at
wow,
that
okay.
point. And then when you go to the competition ice climbing and you see how different it is, then it was just like, oh wow, I can do this. What I love to do, the skiing and the darkness part, but I can do it as like a real sport. At that moment, it felt like, now I know what I want to do the next few years.
Oh, interesting. It just felt right. And
Yeah, it felt like some goal you set, and then you can work really hard for it. You don't have to question it for some time. You can just like go for it.
well, that's always my problem is I always have like all these different goals and then I'm, just punting or making excuses for why not. It's very rare to find something where you know right away that that's what you want to do, at least for me. And so maybe you operate differently. And I guess like have you had those types of experiences where you knew like right away like this is what I want to do and it just kind of clicked for you before?
Oh, yeah. I think in many things I do, I feel like when I start, I want to know what's the next step, and I want to know how far I can go. Maybe it's also like in science, when I went to study biology, then it was like I have to go all the way. And then now my job is to organize competitions. And I started with having a Finnish championships. And now, step up after step, we will have the Youth World Championships next year. So it's kind of like everything I do, it's just I see how far I can get.
Okay. When you say that though, do you mean like you're planning ahead at what the possibilities are? Or when you're in it, you're just kind of like, well, we did this, let's see what else is possible? Or,
Yes. I think
okay.
it's definitely that. I do one step and then I'm like, but I can do next one too. So then I do the next one. I can do the next one too.
Yeah.
And I'm usually quite sure about myself. I don't know if that's the kind of, at least I don't stop anything because I think that, oh, I shouldn't go that far, or I shouldn't, maybe I'm not capable of this and that. I want to see the point where I'm actually not capable of anymore.
That hesitation just now, is that more a representation of like Finnish society where you were sort of
Yeah.
like, okay. We were very quick to like,
Yeah, it's cultural thing.
okay. When do you know if you've reached I don't know if there's an end to it, but like, let's say you come to a point and you're like, well, this is the next thing. Have you ever experienced where like, well, this is the next thing and like, it seems too much or like, this is enough, I guess?
Not in a way, if I still want it, then I don't think I'm gonna give up. But then also, I think it's something you have to at some point shift the energy to something else. Otherwise, you can get stuck of some thought. And in ice climbing, if I think the competition ice climbing, when I had already kind of achieved what I felt like important, then I saw what I should do to go to the next step. I knew already like how I should train and what I should train. And then at that point, it felt like, okay, I don't want to give all that to this sport. I want to use that energy to the next thing, which was coaching and start to develop the climbing in Finland and all that. So I think it's more like a decision that, okay, now I've seen that I can get everything I want, and then I can shift to another thing.
I'm curious what you think, but my perception, generally speaking, is people can get a little blindsided by, some sort of performance metric or goal or desired outcome. So, for example, like if your goal was to get gold at a World Cup, for example, and you evaluated that, you were like, I don't know what your goals were, but like if you said that was that, and you evaluated this, I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z, and dedicate X hours per week, and do all this stuff to try to even get to that realm, and then you balance that with other priorities and things that you were looking to do. Do you think that you have a particular ability to, I guess, consider all the factors at play and sort of like where your heart really is as well, to be able to like break that down?
I don't know if that's a big ability, but at least I think if you spend your life doing things what you really love at that point, then it can't go wrong, because then you spend your whole life doing things that you have the passion for. But also, if you get stuck just because you had the passion at some point and then it's not there anymore, and then you just keep on doing it because you didn't reach something, or you think you didn't reach something and you just can't stop, then use the energy for something else. So it's very important to always like have these checkpoints where you think that, is this really still what I want? This is still what I want to use all my energy for. If you have those checkpoints and then you answer yes, or then you answer no and go to something else, then you just don't lose anything. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. It's interesting because I don't actually think a lot of people do that. At least in the conversation I've had, it doesn't seem to be the case. Usually there'll be some sort of friction that'll come up that'll force the issue. And for you, like, do you formalize it? Do you have like yearly check-ins or monthly check-ins or something with yourself? And is there a process to it, or is it just kind of comes up naturally?
I think it comes when there is a moment where everything doesn't work that well. You travel the other side of the world and then you fall from the first move,
Yeah.
or something gets just everyday life, it's too hard. And then those are the points where you think that, okay, do I still like everything I do? Or can I just drop something? Or do I have to change something?
The flip side too is also the ability to be brutally honest with yourself too, right? Because like oftentimes if you're really dedicated to something or a goal, you can sort of delude yourself, right?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes people are a little bit afraid of making the changes. Like when I quit the science and everybody's asking like, do you regret? And I'm like, no, I think it was perfect as long as I did it. And then, I quit at the moment where it didn't fit into my dreams anymore.
Mm.
And then many people are like, you lost those years. And I was like, no, I didn't lose them. I did something I really loved. And if I had stayed there because I had the degree, I would have just go on the career because that was the path I started. Then I would have lost the years, because now I'm perfectly happy that I did all that, because, even if I don't work at the science anymore, work at the science, you get such a background for anything you do. There is so many skills you learn in a science that you can use in other work too. It's just like organizing and being critical for what people say, if it's true or not, and those things you get from the science. So I think I got everything I was able to get from the science, and then now I can use it for other things.
I'm envious because it's not that I have a lot of regrets, but I have a really hard time of just like saying like, this is absolutely what feels right, what I want to do, and then just going for it. I'm always like, I don't know, like tiptoeing along.
Yeah, it's not always that easy for me either. But yeah, I feel I made good decisions.
Well, you were talking about how being in science gave you certain skills, being able to evaluate and parse out things. And I know that you did do 2 coaching, I think professional coaching degrees, but you've also been doing a lot of self-teaching. And I guess wondering, how How's your coaching career path progressed?
Of course, it's all the time, like most of the knowledge, especially in climbing coaching, is in the internet. So you have to like read what other coaches have there. Like there is so many podcasts and so many blogs and stuff. And then you have to kind of take all that in and then, find your way. Because there's so many things in coaching which is not like a science. That's just like feelings. So then you have to find your way. In coaching, it's all about how the coach and the athlete work together. To make a program which works, you can just copy paste it from the internet. As you know, there is so many, and there is so many books which already told you like how many repeats, how hard, all that. But the actual coaching is the chemistry. So the athletes, they must trust the coach, and then they have the piece so that they can train and get better. They don't have to question it. To understand that you are not maybe the best coach for everyone, then when you find the athlete finds the right coach and the coach finds the right athlete so that the chemistry is working, then actual coaching is happening. It's a lot of learning, and it's a lot of like you have to be okay with the fact that you are not the best coach for everyone. So there's lots of just thinking and trying to learn from the athletes how to be a good coach. And also, especially when you coach youth, it's even more complicated than adults. I think the most of the learning comes just by being with the youths. But then I also like to, because I have the little scientist in me, so I have been in the Climbing Research Association, which has these seminars about the actual like climbing science, where they measure like all the climbing things. So I've been attending those, and those are always super interesting. And I feel that I get much more out of them because I have the science background and all that stuff. So yeah, I try to get better in coaching and learn by doing it and analyzing what I do, but also like get more information from the many places where you can get the information.
Can you just clarify like what your roles are?
Yeah, I have my own team, which I coached, which is for sport climbing. Mm-hmm. Then we have the ice climbing team, which is mostly some of the youths are the same from my team, but they just want to spend in the winter some time within ice climbing, which I think is very good for the youth because then their fingers can rest a little bit and they do something else and outdoors and all that. It's more like not so serious than sport climbing to have ice climbing in the winter. And then I have my own team, and then there is a climbing club which has lots of teams. So I'm kind of those coaches. Some of them are not so experienced, so I try to mentor them. That's at the gym. And then there's the national team, but in Finland, the national team doesn't train so much together, the youths, because they live all over the Finland. So those I only see at if we have a national team camp, or then when we travel to the competitions. Some of the youths I coach are in the national team, so then I'm like in their lives daily.
Yeah.
But some of the youths in the national team I just follow, and I'm of course available if they need something, but they have their own coach. And so it's a big structure. It's complicated, but for me it's of course simple because I live in it.
Yeah.
So
I'm laughing because in our first call you mentioned nothing happens in youth climbing in Finland without your approval or something like that.
Yeah, that's a joke, but yeah, it feels sometimes that I'm part of everything, which is not always good. But I feel that I have talked to other national teams and other sports. And I think that's in many sports, that's the case. It needs only a few who are like really into that sport, and they start to develop all the fields. And it feels like they do everything. But at some point when the sport grows, hopefully there will be other people. And at the end, those two can just sit or one or two, they can just sit on the couch and have a cup of coffee. And it's like, oh, I was helping to create all that.
You think you would ever get to that point? You seem like you like
No, maybe I'm actually in a band in Spain. So I just hear I get a postcard about it. So
Yeah, when you're done,
yeah.
I don't know if you're referring to sport climbing specifically or ice climbing or all of it, because comp ice climbing would make sense to me, because usually in the earlier stages you need like catalysts, individuals that sort of do like an outsized amount of work to move things forward. When you're talking about this, are you talking about like sport youth climbing or overall youth climbing, or?
I think, yeah, overall, yes. I think it's sport youth climbing, but of course, in sport climbing, there is also other people who are keepers. Maybe in ice climbing, it's more like it's been very few of us who went there, and then maybe me and my husband, whose energy have made the youth team, and it's much smaller scale. But with both, it's the same story.
Yeah. In coaching, and I've heard this distinction from Marcus Garcia, who actually started the youth team for US ice climbing, and some of the athletes that he worked with. They were the first US competitors to get medals in lead at the World Cup this past year. So like his program has been effective. And the reason why I brought Marcus up is because his methodology for coaching sounds a lot like yours, where it was much more, he actually termed it more mentorship than anything. It was much more of about developing that mutual trust and that deeper connection. And coaching, you can always figure out different plans and whatnot, but it was, asking them how they're doing, if there are fears or things like that about, things that are coming up. It doesn't always have to be about climbing. And this is a long-winded way of asking. So for you, like when you meet new climbers that you're coaching or about to coach, like where do you start with them to establish that connection?
Yeah, it's not like a one day. It's all set. It's gonna take some time. Maybe in the beginning, it's more like we have to check the physical side, where they are in climbing, and maybe I give more like things that you can improve in your technique, and we maybe focus more on those things, that they get the trust that now we are actually working on the climbing. It depends on really much on the person. Like with some of them, it's like a half a year, and then they start feel like that they can tell me everything, and it's a slow start. But maybe in the beginning, you focus more on the like actual coaching, and like the coaching the climbing and talking about that, and then slowly get to know. Like any person you meet, you cannot just like first time, what's your fear?
Yeah, of course. Unless you're American. Americans are just like
Yeah,
very,
maybe Americans.
very loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I did promise to get back to dry tooling. We kind of bounced a little bit all over the place, but you were part of the first contingent to compete at the World Cups. And you mentioned going with your friend, I think, to observe first and then compete.
No, we went to compete for
the very first time.
There was actually, I think some Finns visited some of the World Cups already before us, but we were like the first ones who started to go there and actually get into the sport more. When we went first time, I don't think I had ever kicked plywood. So when I started the first qualification route, before that I was worried that what if I kick and my shoe doesn't stay. So, and when I looked at the video from the first competition, we were all so slow. We were like every hold, we were just happily hanging for 30 seconds, and it was quite bad. But at least we went to see how it is, and we got really excited, and we started training. And I remember it was in Saas-Fee in Switzerland. When you see the pros going on the huge roof and doing all the figure fours, and it just looked so amazing, and so like, oh wow, if I can ever do that. And then you end up doing it. So
how did that experience compare, and how did the setting compare to the annual dry tooling event that you would participate in?
Oh, a lot, because we didn't have, because it was concrete wall, so we had to use the climbing shoes or sneakers.
The holds were probably different as well, and like the style was a little bit different too, I imagine.
Yeah, the holds were desperate in the beginning. We had just been dry tooling with the holes, which had like huge holes. like what we were practicing was long moves or something like this. And then suddenly you had to climb with the holes where you can actually slip. So it was quite scary in the beginning.
I bet. Yeah, it's a little mind-boggling because you're going to like the world's best very quickly. Were you nervous or intimidated or anything like that, or are you just kind of in the moment and just trying to do the best you can?
Yeah, I think we were nervous, or I was nervous also. But I'm not like before I compete. I'm nervous, but not in a way that would affect my performance. So I think I'm compared to many people competing. I think I'm more like, okay, I'm go there and do my best. We'll see how much is it today. So I'm
So you don't psych
no
yourself
panic.
out. Yeah.
No.
Where do you think that comes from? Is that natural or is developed?
No, I think I don't know. I don't see, because I know it's safe. I'm not gonna die. It's only competition. I don't know. Maybe I can do the talk what the coaches normally do, the athlete. I can do it to myself. And also I think that the stress is, I have somehow made myself think that the stress is making me stronger. I'm not sure if it's true, but if you can make that mindset that it's making me stronger. And I also try always to say the youths that if they are stressed, it's only good thing because it means that it's important for them. Embrace the stress or the being nervous, because then it's big for you. And then you are in the right place. I sometimes, if I got stressed, I was thinking that, oh my God, I have to go there. And then I'm like, but the other option is that I would be sitting home watching this from the, live stream. And now I have a chance to be here. So which one I choose? I was like, no, I want to be here. I want to do this. I want to go there. So
it's incredibly powerful because you're basically turning stress and fear on its head. I mean, you're making it a resource versus a detriment. It's not taking away from you. It's like building you up. What I also find refreshing from some athletes, they'll talk about, the outcome doesn't matter. I've trained my best. I'm showing up and doing the best I can so that the outcome doesn't matter. I know that me just being here and being able to have the experience like makes it all worthwhile anyways. It's like a fine line to say that and still have that drive to do your best. There's like this distinction where it's like you can believe that enough, or maybe you say it to give yourself an out if you don't, win or do your best.
Yeah, I know what you mean. If you go to competition, you go there to win. You don't travel somewhere and compete to get the 10th place. Of course, we all go there for a win, but you can be happy with some other result too, but you must want the win. I think then it's very clear that you do everything you can to win, and that you train and you go there to win, and then you can be satisfied with also just trying very hard and doing your best. I always tell the youths that I don't have the translation for this, but it means kind of that 15 minutes you can hate everyone. If you fail in the competition, you can hate your teammates, you hate everyone who is better than you, you hate the route setters, you hate your coach, you can hate everybody for 15 minutes, and then you have to get over it. Because if you start, you go to the corner and cry for 2 hours, you will have the worst day ever. But if after 15 minutes, you just like, okay, I get over it now. That was didn't go so well. And I go cheer my friends and I go, enjoy the competition. Then you will have a nice time. And you remember that, oh, it was actually a very fun weekend. But for 15 minutes, it's okay to just cry your eyes out and hate everyone.
I like that idea. The 15-minute pity party. And then,
and then it's sometimes 20 minutes. Sometimes the youth comes like, oh, maybe Enni, it was 20 minutes this time. It was so hard. But then
5 more minutes. 5 more minutes.
Let me cry. 5 more minutes. Yeah. Where you notice it's when you don't do so well. Because when you still value the prize enough, then you can handle also the disappointment. You are like, okay, this next time, and this is all worth of it. But when you actually don't value the success anymore. When you get the disappointment, you are like, why the hell am I here? Like, what's the point? I noticed the last year, if I didn't do that well, I was like, I want to go home. I don't want to be here. I don't want to go to the parties. I don't want to see these people anymore. It lost the meaning of being part of something because I didn't value the success that much anymore. So then I knew that it's maybe time to focus something else.
Was that the main reason you were there? Because like a lot of folks that have competed at that level for a while, they talk about like the World Cup family, and just because they it was really small when they started, they got into it, they've all kind of come up together. But you kind of came in maybe a little bit later. So for you, was the relationships with other athletes, was that an important criteria for you, or something that you like looked forward to? Or
I think it was one of the things where what you love there is the people are amazing and there is this family. But then you still need to, be there for the sport. If you just don't want to go there only for those people. Maybe you can then go to Spain with them or the sport climbing trip. I don't know, somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's very important. That's one of the best things in ice climbing is that it's still enough small sports that everybody is kind of supporting each other and you get really good friends from there. But then it's still, you have to be there for the sport.
You eventually stopped competing and to focus more on coaching. More recently, you've gotten into route setting as well. So what was that experience like setting in Oulu this past year?
Oh, yeah, it was I actually route set at the gym weekly. So I do sport routes. Yesterday I was route setting, so I really like it. It's very creative and I like it in a way because I also coach. So I can create the problems and then help people solve them. It's like it goes really well with the coach. Yeah. It goes really well with the coaching. But also, yeah, I've been route setting a lot, so all that is familiar, but I haven't been route setting for tri-tooling. Then in Oulu last year, there was the European Cup, and I don't know, I asked if I can come there, or they asked me if I want to come there as an assistant route setter. And I was like, yeah, that's a great experience. I would like to do that. But then it ended up that the actual chief, who was supposed to be the chief, he couldn't make it. And then they just sent me a message that, what about if you do the whole thing? And I was like,
you're coming anyway.
Yep. I thought that, okay, I have never done competition route, but I think I can do it. So I felt that I'm not the one taking the risk there. So I decided that I do my best and we see how it goes. I had a few things what I wanted to do there. I definitely wanted the men and women to climb the same route, all qualifications and finals. And then there was I wanted youths to have because there was also a youth category, so I wanted them to have a very good routes because sometimes they are just put to the side wall to do some easy stuff. So I wanted them to have a real good route. So I sometimes feel that in ice climbing, the routes for women are made like for women. And the routes for men are made like a men routes. And then it also kind of directs how the women and men train. The men have much more like powerful stuff, so they get super strong. And then the women's maybe the routes are made so that you don't have to be so strong. So I think that my idea there was that if we put them on the same route, we show everybody that the gap is not so big. And also that the women can do, powerful stuff. And they should do more powerful stuff and they should benefit if they are strong. Yeah, so then we put them on the same routes. And I think it went well. It was amazing competition. It was in a different way. I was very nervous than when I'm competing. This time, I was more nervous.
It's interesting because less is in your control. I mean, you can design a route. I mean, I think it takes a lot of experience to be able to design it in a way that like you can only do a move a certain way, like your intention. But if you're designing routes for the first time for men and women, I imagine that's just like a lot of variability and guesswork. What was the response, and like how many men and women topped out, let's say like the final? Like did you design it like I only want like 2 women, 2 men to be able to top out kind of thing? And
There was one man who topped a little bit timed out, so maybe they should have like a half a minute more. But there was some of the guys got to the end. The guys didn't have so much climbing time. The women had a little bit more.
okay.
But I think the route worked for both categories because there was like not a stop or move where none of the women can get past or something that all the men are just running. And so I totally saw that there's like a different challenges for both. But it's also within, one gender. There is taller climbers and shorter, and I think the changes within the gender are more or less not so different than the differences between the genders. So I think there's lots of things to improve in route setting if you just, look at it a little bit differently.
I'm wondering how you set to create like parity between the male and female competitors, because like they're generally speaking average, men have 20% or 20 times, 20 times the amount of testosterone or more than women. And this is averages, right? And I'm wondering like how you were thinking about balancing the routes just so there was more of like a level playing field. Because I don't know, does the difference in power matter that much for men and women in dry tooling?
Yeah, I don't know. Many of the hardest dry tooling routes, the women have like done them too. I don't know if it really matters, but I don't mean that the gender should be mixed in a competition. I think more that the route settings shouldn't be like a men's routes and women's routes, and there would be difference. Okay, the level can be very different because maybe the men there is more, at least in the World Cups, very strong men than the women's. There is not so many, so the level can be different, but the route setting shouldn't be okay. This is the women's route, so we do just like a very sketchy holes, and they are 20 centimeters apart from each other. And then this is the men's route. We do these big jumps. It's just like the style of the route setting should be more equal. I have to say that the route setting experience, because it was very cold, it was very windy, and we had a lift. The wall there is, I think, 20 meters, and we had a lift, which we shouldn't have even used in that wind, but we had to. And it was going back and forth, and you had to drill while going past the wall. And there was this Japanese Masato with me, which was amazing that he came. And I think we did some of the routes so that he was climbing, and then if he couldn't do them, like the move looked too hard, then I was like, go back one, and then I changed the hold. And it was quite challenging. Like sometimes indoors you can have a cup of coffee and you watch the wall and have an inspiration. It was more like a survival game. So I'm happy we got the routes up and they worked. So just that, not to make it the sound too planned. It was more like, okay, we have to get this done now.
I imagine there was a time crunch too.
Yeah, there was a time and it was dark and lots of snow, and it was an experience.
What is the state of the youth team for ice climbing in Finland? Because as a comparison, the Scottish/UK dry tooling club that's doing a lot for developing like their youth program, then Spain has their own program, Team USA has their own, and one of the challenges seems to be in this sport is that you have a lot of like ebb and flow with these national teams. Some teams will have like a generation that does really well, and then there's no one else in the ranks basically to come up. So how are you thinking about longevity for the Finnish ice climbing team?
I hope it kind of looks like we have every year the team. Some of them have been already like the youths have been there like 4 years, and now they are getting to the adults, and there is few who are really into it. But of course there is it's not like in sport climbing where there would be supports or something like this. So it's very up to me and my husband if we help the youths to go there. But yeah, I think we will see how it goes. But at least I do everything I can to make it work.
We always end on this one. If you were to give your younger self one piece of beta, what would that be?
Oh, I don't know. How young?
Yeah, it's up to your interpretation.
Maybe if I were very young, I would have told myself to go into climbing a little bit earlier. But no, I know what you mean. I think I would say just like go on. You're doing great. Just keep on doing what you do. You'll be fine.
Yeah, you seem like you had your head on straight for from the beginning. Seems like you knew what you wanted and were able to go for it. Well, thank you very much, Enni, for chatting today.
Thank you. It was fun.
As is a trend among many of our guests, Enni keeps a low social profile. But if you'd like to follow her for occasional updates, her handle is at Enni Bertling. So that is ENNIBERTLING. As always, thanks to Hannah Noel for providing the intro music and Andrew Solomon for editing. See you all next week.